The greatest deception is not pretending to be rich when you are broke. It is letting your enemies believe they have completely destroyed you while you silently control their entire destiny. For over 2 decades, I have operated a massive shipping empire that dominates the region, yet I walk around in muddy boots and drive a rusted truck. Nobody expects the old man watering his garden to own the very building they work in. My name is Arthur Vance, and my life is intentionally quiet despite the millions flowing through my bank accounts. My daughter Chloe did not inherit my desire for obscurity, as she fell in love with a flashy corporate climber named Preston Boyd. Preston was highly capable but possessed the dangerous confidence of a man who had never experienced failure, which made me watch him very closely from the shadows. When Chloe informed me that their relationship was serious, I decided to test his true character by pulling some major strings behind the scenes. I used an independent executive search firm to secretly hire Preston as the chief executive officer of my own conglomerate, Vance Cross Enterprise. He believed he won the position through pure merit, completely unaware that the mysterious founder was actually his future father-in-law. For over a year, Preston managed the operations beautifully, which genuinely impressed me and made my daughter incredibly proud of her choice. The peace shattered on a crisp evening when Preston invited me to a luxury restaurant to finally meet his parents who were visiting from out of town. He spoke with a polite condescension that corporate executives often use when addressing an old man they deem insignificant. I arrived at the high-end establishment wearing a faded canvas jacket and heavy work boots just to see how they would react to my appearance. Preston greeted me at the door without flinching, but his parents, Garrett and Clara Boyd, immediately overcompensated with artificial warmth and excessive handshakes. They clearly categorized me as a simple country farmer who posed absolutely no threat to their sophisticated lifestyle. We shared casual conversation through the main course until Garrett reached into his expensive suit jacket to pull out a thick cream-colored envelope. He placed it firmly on the table like a weapon, while his wife took a slow sip of wine and Preston looked down at his plate in silence. Garrett adjusted his posture and stated that we needed to discuss the dark history of my past. Inside that envelope lay the ghost of Julian Cross, the man who had been my business partner 30 years ago when we were both young and ambitious. Julian had systematically stolen funds from our corporate accounts to build a rival operation, forcing me to document his crimes and give him a strict ultimatum to disappear. He chose to run away, but he apparently left behind a legacy of lies. Garrett revealed himself as the younger brother of Julian, raised on a false narrative that I had ruthlessly destroyed a good man and stolen his future. He demanded my immediate resignation from the company and a massive financial payout as restitution for the losses of his family. Garrett threatened to expose this fabricated scandal, believing he held all the power because his son was now the chief executive. I looked closely at Preston and realized the young man was completely blindsided by the actions of his father at the dinner table. His face flushed with deep embarrassment as he looked between Garrett and me, realizing he was merely a pawn in an old family grudge. Preston tried to intervene, but his father coldly silenced him, completely ignoring the emotional damage he was causing. They did not realize that I never enter a room without knowing exactly what lies behind every door. I reached into my jacket and produced a smaller white envelope containing the original bank statements from 3 decades ago, proving the systematic theft committed by Julian. I also included a signed affidavit from our old accountant, who was perfectly willing to testify to the fraud in a court of law. As Garrett stared at the undeniable proof of the dishonesty of his brother, I turned my attention directly toward his stunned son. I explained to Preston that the executive search firm, the corporate board, and the entire multi-million-dollar empire he managed belonged entirely to me. The young man sat paralyzed as he finally understood that the simple old man in the work jacket was his actual employer. The atmosphere turned freezing cold as Preston turned to his father and demanded to know how long Garrett had planned this deception. Garrett admitted he recognized the company name before the engagement and saw the success of his son as the perfect opportunity for financial extortion. Preston pulled his hand away from his mother, completely disgusted that his genuine love for Chloe had been weaponized for greed. Preston stood up for himself, stating he refused to participate in a scheme built on historical lies, showing the true integrity of a real leader. I looked at Garrett and informed him that his legal threats were entirely harmless because my daughter Chloe had recently inherited the majority shares of the enterprise. Their entire plot had completely collapsed because they underestimated the quiet architect sitting right across from them. Defeated and stripped of their arrogant pride, Garrett and Clara stood up from the table and silently exited the restaurant into the night. Preston watched them leave with a mixture of heavy sadness and absolute clarity, knowing his relationship with his parents would never be the same. The long shadow of a 30-year-old lie had finally vanished, leaving just the two of us behind. We sat in silence until the waiter returned to offer dessert, prompting us to order 2 large chocolate cakes and strong black coffee. Preston looked me in the eye and asked if I genuinely trusted him to run the multi-state corporation going forward. I reminded him of the millions he saved us through his brilliant logistics restructuring, confirming that his position was completely secure. I drove home in my battered truck under the stars, feeling a deep sense of peace that the past was finally laid to rest. My phone buzzed with a message from Chloe, saying she loved me but agreed with Preston that my old work clothes were completely ridiculous. I smiled into the darkness, knowing that those simple clothes had successfully protected everything we built for the future.